is the Phylanice Nashe Experience Podcast. Hello, world, and welcome to the Phylanice Nashe Experience Podcast, an audio series of lighthearted and sometimes third eye opening conversations on entrepreneurship, leadership, and relationships from the African American perspective. I am your host, Phylanice Nashe. Welcome. And my guest today is a Nashville business banking leader. He is the co-founder of the Studio Bank here in Nashville. He's a community advocate. He's a master networker. He's a family man, and he is a native Nashvilleian. So if you're from Nashville, you'll know that is a rarity. So let's give a warm Phylanice Nashe Experience Podcast welcome to Harry Allen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you agreed to be on the show because there aren't that many Black co-founders of banks.
Yeah, that true statement.
Yeah, so I thought we would dive into that. But first, what I mostly discuss with my guests when we first get on the show is COVID. We're a year and a half into this pandemic. It's still with us. We're actually in a spike of the second spike of the D variant. And so how have things have been for your business? How have things been for your family? Tell us how you guys have fared over the last year and a half.
So I'll start with the business. I'm actually tremendously grateful. Being a banker in the middle of COVID and, the economic downturn and so many small businesses trying to pivot and figure out what's what. I think that bankers were called to a front line of sorts to figure out, how do we best partner and deploy capital to those businesses that are in need and individuals as well.
Right.
There are a number of government programs like the Paycheck Protection Program that rode on the rails of the banking system. And it was tough. I remember in the height of PPP, bankers working around the clock. But we were celebrating every SBA approval that we got. That meant a retention of jobs in our community and a small business owner getting capital that they desperately needed. And so, our team was at the desk with wine and cupcakes, and it was kind of a party and working late into the night all in one. And that has led to some unexpected, growth for the bank. Interest rates have fallen since COVID ensued, which meant a lot of mortgage refinance activity and purchases, which is good for the bank. And then, I talked about the lending piece. So early on, I felt like it was awkward to talk about success from a business perspective in the middle of a global pandemic when so many are hurting. Right. But then I said, you know what, people need our institutions to be strong, especially banks that are community minded right now. So I leaned into it and we got after it and served as many people as we can.
Awesome.
Yeah. On the personal
that's
side,
awesome.
Another story altogether. I've got 3 kids. 9, 8, and 5. And so, the whole virtual school, in school, back virtual, that's been nuts. Not able to take, vacation like we usually do. So, I think being a parent in all of this has been hard. So I've got a newfound appreciation for teachers all over the world. And a lot of solidarity with my peers who are raising young children in the middle of COVID.
Yes,
everybody's been safe. Everybody's
good.
Yes.
That's the main thing is that everyone's remained healthy and safe through this, because that's not the case for many people.
You're exactly right
during this time.
Right.
Okay, so I led off by
Yeah.
saying that you are a native Nashvilleian, and how for us who are not, it's unique to meet people who are from Nashville. So let's get into your origin story, Harry.
Yeah.
You are from Nashville, but you are also leading community efforts in your own community. So tell us who you are. Who's Harry Allen, and how did you get into banking and start a bank?
Yeah. So, yes, I'm from Nashville. I'm a 5th generation Nashvilleian. So my family has deep roots in the community. Went to public schools all the way through, graduated from Hume Fogg. And the summer after I graduated, I interned with SunTrust Bank. So I was 18 years old, Phylanice, when I started banking, and interned every summer as a part of Inroads. I'm not sure if you're familiar
I
with
am.
it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
SunTrust was my sponsoring company, and I spent every summer interning in commercial banking, working with businesses, but then during the school year, served as a teller part-time while I was at Belmont. And so been in banking ever since I can remember. It's funny. My wife reminded me that I was in the banking club in 7th grade,
Oh,
and
wow.
he was the president of the banking club. So I think I was destined maybe to be in
Yes.
banking.
Yes.
But yeah, stayed at SunTrust for a while, left and left banking in 2008. I was the CFO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and
Mm.
then came back to banking in 2011. And I've always had this mix of, wanting to succeed from a professional standpoint, but also serve the community that has raised me. So I've always volunteered a lot. I served on my first board of directors of a nonprofit when I was 25, and just really enjoy that service aspect. And I believe you can do well and do good at the same time.
Very important. Very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So tell us how, and I started off by mentioning that you are a Black man who has
Mm,
co-founded a bank, and
mhm,
that is a very small club.
mhm,
There
mhm.
are a couple of others who are here in Nashville, Daryl Freeman, Michael Carter with Pinnacle Bank, but that's not the norm. And we do have a historically Black owned bank here
Yeah.
with Citizens, but you started a new bank. You have a fairly new
Mhm.
uh, boutique bank.
Yeah. We just celebrated 3 years. Yeah, it's brand.
Yes. Yeah. So tell us the story about how that
Yeah.
came to be. And you're like, I am going to start a bank and it's going to happen today. And how did that happen? Like, how did you also move
Mhm,
from, your W-2
mhm,
into,
mhm,
now I'm going to jump into
mhm.
entrepreneurship. So how did all of that
Yes.
happen?
Yeah. So I was working for a bank, and it sold to a regional bank. And, at that point, I'd worked for SunTrust, I'd worked for a much smaller organization, and I knew that the role that a community bank plays in a local community is really impactful. Bankers who know business owners in their backyard and who know executive directors of nonprofits, and the folks who are serving on their boards. We are empowered to make decisions for our neighbors and our community in a way that is different from a regional bank where loans are underwritten out of Atlanta or
Right.
Chicago or so forth.
Right.
And I knew that Nashville still needed that local bank as we grew as a city. That doesn't mean that our community needs to be without local decision making from a banking perspective. So a coworker of mine who had actually left the bank about 6 months before the merger was announced, Aaron Dorn, Studio
Mhm.
CEO, right when it was announced, he texted me and said we should grab coffee. And at coffee, he said, we should start a bank. And my first answer was like, "You're crazy." I've got a 3-month-old at home. I can't go to my wife on maternity leave and say I'm quitting and starting a bank. But 2 weeks later, a couple of things happened. One, I continued to get to know the acquiring organization and just realized there wasn't, a real evident path for someone who had 20 years left in their
Mhm.
career to continue to advance.
Mhm.
And sometimes we have to create our own opportunities for
Right.
advance.
Right.
And then Philando Castile and the incident of his shooting, and he was one of the first kind of unarmed Black men that caused community outrage, and there was a flood of money to Black-owned banks right around that time. And I saw an opportunity, to really demonstrate to Nashville that we can build an organization that reflects all of this city
Mhm.
in terms of diversity of industry, diversity of demographics. And yes, a 35-year-old from North Nashville can be a part of making that happen. And I knew if it failed, there were 64 other banks in town, and hopefully one of them would hire me. But we were tremendously successful. We raised some seed capital so that I could, could quit my job and we could still pay ourselves through the application phase. We raised it from 38 individuals in Nashville that bought into the vision. One of the earliest investors was an African-American, Sam Howard. And he not only invested, but gave us free office space, which was really, really meaningful.
Yeah.
And then in 6 weeks, we raised another $40 million to start the bank. So I think Nashville was ready for something different, for sure.
How do you, so now this question came from Turner.
Okay.
So there were two questions. First, if anyone knows you, you are like a networking master. Because you can't raise that kind of money without having relationships, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like just networking and meeting people and just bonding is in your DNA. Talk to us about the value of networking, whether it's, integrate. I mean, it was obviously integral in the starting of Studio, but what is the value of it to you?
Yeah, I love this question. So, when we were all sitting around deciding, what is my title going to be? What's your title going to be? I chose Chief Relationship Officer because a bank is made up of relationships, and they're tremendously valuable. I did not fully appreciate the value of relationships until starting this bank and realizing it as an opportunity to leverage every single connection I had made over the course of my career in life. My Sunday school teacher invested in the bank, and so I tell people, don't burn a bridge, because you never know, when that relationship will be important to you. The other piece is that I just believe, and my dad was a pastor, and maybe it comes from being a preacher's kid, but I show up at a table or a conversation with this posture of service. So, banking at some level is about sales, but I never approach my work as a sale. I don't come across as a salesperson. I listen long enough to figure out who can I connect this person to, or what resource do I have that can drive their business or vision forward. And sometimes I lead with the connection, and then, a year later, I'll get some business out of it. But it's because they remember that I connected them to their attorney or their marketing person or so forth. And we wanted to build a bank where bankers are seen as a valuable partner, not just someone who's providing a service, but an extension of the team for our clients, and a thought partner. And I think that even in this day of technology, and a lot of folks can do everything they need to from their phone when it comes to banking. At some point, you need a person to call, and you need to have a conversation like, I've got this going on in my life. What can you do to help? And I love that about the work that I do. I get excited about a new checking account, whatever, but it's more about making these connections and leveraging the contacts that I have and that the bank has for the benefit of our clients.
That's very important. Very important. So I want to shift a little bit, because one of the tenets, as you heard me say in the intro, is entrepreneurship, leadership, and then relationships. And so let's shift to probably the most important relationship in your life, which is the one with your wife and your family. Right. And so I always ask my guests about, how do you manage work and family life, especially you're 3 years in. I don't know if you guys still call yourselves a startup or not, but that's still kind of within the startup arena.
Right? Definitely high growth. Yeah.
Yes. And so how have you guys been able to successfully balance work life? And what have been some of the ups and downs, in trying to do that and find what works for you?
Yeah. So I think, balance when it comes to work-life balance is an ongoing challenge. Like you have to, um, similar to the vision casting of the bank, like you have to cast a vision for what your family and your lifestyle is going to be about,
Mhm.
and then determine what are those non-negotiables. So I remember, I mentioned that I've served on a number of boards around town. When I had my first child, I decided not to join a board that met regularly in the evenings because I want to be the dad that is there at bedtime and reads the
Right,
bedtime story and acts
right.
silly with the kids when I come home from work. And so you it is easier to find balance when you decide on the front end what type of relationship with your family you want to have. Um, it's funny. I used to joke with my mom, like, I don't want to be a daddy. I want to be a father, right? Like, I want
Ooh,
to be
good
present.
point.
And that's my why. Like, if it's not working on that front, then nothing else, matters.
Exactly.
And so yeah, I just decided that we try to make sure we're home for dinner as many nights as possible together as a family. It's just really, really important. Vacationing together,
Hmm.
um, but it's not easy, but it's important. I think having a founding team that we all have, young families. We're a young management team, so we support each other
Hmm.
in that way. And we actually rolled out a benefit to all employees last year that after 4 years of being with the company pays for a week vacation, for you and your family. And it's not a cash bonus, like it's a travel voucher. You gotta go somewhere. One employee said, "Do I have to take my whole family?" And I'm like, "Well, that's up to you." But you can preach work-life balance, you can model it, but you can also incentivize it as an employer, and show that care for your employees.
And that's one of the like the key terms lately is like self-care. So
Yeah,
I'm very happy to hear that studio is involved in helping its employees to maintain that work life, because some companies don't. They want you to work, they want you to put the phone down, don't look at anything, and work here until the clock is over with, and then you can
yep,
do that.
yep.
I
No,
think those days are over.
it's about flexibility, especially these last 18 months. I think that companies have been tested.
Mm,
If you truly believe in work-life balance, how are you supporting people in the middle of a global pandemic? And
exactly.
so we never forced people as things were reopening to come back to the office. We said, you do what you need to do. We've proven we can work virtually,
Hmm.
and giving people that time to figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect. So we're getting a little close to the end of our time together, but I wanted to give you a moment to either, if are there any call to actions or final thoughts or words of wisdom, nuggets of wisdom that you want to leave with the listeners and viewers of the show who may be still kind of teetering on, jumping and taking the leap,
Yeah.
especially now since we've been kind of isolated for 18 months. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to leave with the people?
Yeah, well, first call to action. I wouldn't be a good entrepreneur if I didn't say, if you are in Nashville, check out Studio Bank. For sure, every single deposit in our bank goes right back into this community through our lending. But in terms of taking that risk, there's never a perfect time, to do something daring. You know, it's all a walk of faith, and conviction. And I say, if there has been a vision or purpose, um, for something that you've been given to build, just figure out the first step and take it. If
Hmm.
that step goes well, take the second step.
Mm.
Um, and before you know it, you've taken 10 and you're like, oh, it's time to quit my job. There's something real here. But yeah, don't be afraid. I think too many of us listen and buy into the voices that say, you're too young, you're too Black, you
Mm.
don't know enough people in Bellmead to raise the capital that you need. Like, no, we know a lot of people.
Right.
We can make this happen. And it's not a solitary journey. No one gets to their destination alone. And so just nurture those relationships and mentors and things and let them carry you very, very far. And if I can be a part of the journey, feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to help.
Well, how can the listeners and viewers keep in touch with you and
Yep.
follow you? Because I know you're very involved in the community. You're doing some speaking gigs and panel
Yeah.
discussions. So how can they follow you and get in
Yep.
touch with you? And how can they follow Studio Bank?
So LinkedIn, Harry L. Allen, Instagram, Harry L. Allen, Studio Bank, www.studiobank.com, and harry.allen@studiobank.com is my email. I am very approachable and willing to grab coffee or lunch with almost anybody in town. So hit me up.
Amen. That is so very true, because I know a local entrepreneur that you're connecting with tomorrow
That's
for lunch.
exactly. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I just want to again thank you, Harry, for agreeing to come on the show and just impart wisdom about your journey with my listeners. And so I just want to encourage anyone who is listening, follow Harry, get in touch with him at Studio Bank. Not only has he been a guest, but he also is our banker.
That's
So
right.
we
That's
do
right.
bank at Studio Bank,
Thank
and
you.
have been proponents of that bank for quite a while now. We try to encourage anyone who's a startup, a business,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
personally to visit you guys, and you guys are absolutely wonderful. So again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. So you can find Harry's contact information in the show notes, all of his social media links, and links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode on my website, which is Phylanice Nashe Experience.com. You can find all of the episodes, seasons 1 and 2 of the Phylanice Nashe Experience podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, including Amazon and iHeartRadio. You can also find all of those episodes again on my website at PhylaniceNasheExperience.com. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is of the same name, Phylanice Nashe Experience Podcast. You can also follow me on social media, Phylanice Nashe, at Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I also want to encourage everyone, we are still in the throes of COVID. Make sure if you can get vaccinated, please do so. It's important so that we can start having some normalcy and begin to see each other in person. So everyone, stay safe, stay well. I will see you next time. Peace.